Hello, everybody. I am Laura Olea, part of the curatorial team at Glogauer residency. Today we have Elisa García de la Huerta, an artist from Chile. I'm really happy to have her with us again. She started with us in the middle of the pandemic crisis, so it was the beginning of the online program, and we're still developing. So it's beautiful to have another time to keep working together, to know more the work. So today we will see a little bit more of her practice from the beginning. So welcome, Elisa, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Glow Hour, for this moment. And I'm a visual artist from Chile, and I study fine arts in Chile, and then I went to do my master's in New York. And then I was traveling for a while. I spent some time in Berlin, and now I'm in Chile since the pandemic. I'm gonna be showing you some first presentation of context of my work, and then some of the current project. Okay. I wanted to start with some very early work. This is in my undergrad. They're monotypes, and they're big scale, and it's a big series, but I chose this because it's interesting how early on there's been an interest in landscape and sort of like the sublime feeling that it happens in connection with nature, and also some aspect where movement has been a big element. Since they are a big scale, it implied a lot of movement while I was doing them. They were exhibited in the National Museum of Fine Arts in Chile. And then this is my thesis project for undergrad in Universidad Finisterra. I had a major in printmaking and painting, and I slowly started moving to installation and embroidery. So big scale has been a main interest of mine. Mainly, I think now I can see that has to do with that performative aspect of the work, and also like the sort of interactive and experiential way of seeing the work. It has some seal screens that are inspired with photographs from biography, and some clothes. Mainly all is recycled material. Here is my thesis project for my master's degree at School of Visual Arts in New York. Slowly the pieces started to become almost like a fort or a tent, and the work has already taken a step into performance. So I will do some kind of actions in space, and then this will be documented and then presented inside these forts. Also, normally these spaces will have Super 8 film that has been taken by my that mainly, and I will manipulate them and present them in the outside of the spaces. But always had that kind of dichotomy between public and private experience and some kind of durational aspect. And then in the meantime, as I lived in London for a year and then I moved to New York, I started doing photographs in landscape, and the work started taking a performative aspect, and a lot of the work has to do with belonging and rooting, and also quoting kind of history of painting. This is after my master's degree. I went to do a residency project in Baltimore. They invited me. It was living in a house with a couple, and mainly doing work about my experience in this place. So here you can see this, the blending of techniques start to happen. I start doing embroidery pieces, and then I install them in public abandoned buildings, and then I document them, and then also I make videos of my kind of intimacy and process or textures and details, and then I show this video inside these forts. This is my solo show in Chile at the Espacio Gallery, and a couple of years later. So you can see there's video, mainly the performances take place in natural landscapes. And then there is the big element of the embroidery becomes more like kind of like a very slow pace aspect of my work in terms of like meditation and like a very tactile aspect. And then there's photographs, and then and also it intertwines with the work that I was doing as part of a collective. So here some of the embroideries are inspired by legends of Chilean indigenous cultures, and so I inspired these kind of visual images, and then I mix collage and drawing and textile that I recycle. And so in the meantime, when I started SVA, I started this collective. And so this was ongoing from 2011 to 2017, and I keep doing some projects with them. But mainly I am interested in showing it because it has that kind of relational aesthetic aspect, and kind of taking a step into social work, and all kind of using a spectacle aesthetic. We were doing these posters to promote the events, and then the performances, and then some of the events will be more like a gathering among women or queer culture. So it has to do, the work is taking a step into like feminism and gender and identity. And then here is more like, let's say, a leap into like ecofeminism, and I was collaborating with other photographers that will take portraits or self-portraiture, and the work is mainly documented by 35 millimeter. Here the photo down, it's a collaboration with Laura Well. She's a photographer from New York. And then here you can see some of the work that I was showing in New York during various shows. And then the work, the photographs are taking a step into more like detailed textural images that not necessarily show the identity of the subject. It's more about the feeling and the texture and some kind of poetry. And here, let's say in the photo down, I was collaborating with Susanna Simpson. She's a poet, she's a performance artist. She wrote this amazing poet about like a personal story, sort of like from a place of like being a queer woman. She's writing this kind of iconic poem to patriarchy. The work is taking a step into like a pretty much like a little more like minimal imagery. And then in terms of performance is kind of accompanying the photograph. Let's say for this show, they invited me to show those photos and then do a performance. And I use elements of nature, like this long seaweed was on top of my head, and then I incorporate movement, and then I do a soundtrack that sometimes has to do with collage or remix culture. And then this is a publication of my recent photography in like kind of more like a fashion magazine in London. And you can see various collaborations with women or more like, let's say, queer dudes. And color is a main aspect, and mainly there is different types of forms of collaboration. Mainly we go into these landscapes and take these photos. This is a recent show. I was doing it during pandemic. The photo of the black and white, I did it during Glow Hour last year. And I collaborated with my brother, Martin García Huerta, who is a photographer. And so I combined it with photos I took straight from nature. And I then was invited to perform, and I did this series of photographs in 35 millimeter. And I mean, since the show was canceled, then I had to do it online. So it became a soundtrack that was published in SoundCloud. And then this is the work I've been working on since 2016. Is this series of embroideries that are big scale. Since the work is much more of a slower pace, this work has not been shown in an exhibition, but it's something I've been working on ongoing. Yeah, so that is for now.
Thank you, Elisa, for take us through this, let's say, like first part of your practice when you start researching with different mediums and techniques. But I will say that your practice is totally transdisciplinary in terms of that all of your work is constantly moving and crossing, respecting each other. Like you are able to mix, mingle, and may cohabitate those different aspects of your work. Like, for example, the aesthetics, the images, the textures, that all of the works that you have been showing share somehow. I will ask a specific about that way of mixing or combining or even a company, like you said, how is important for you to be fluid between your music, your production in music, in photography, also performance, how you are open to do that, and also how you combine that different practice?
Yeah, I mean, I think is kind of a main sort of respect for the work that comes through me. And also they all live in sort of parallel different timings. As I said, like embroidery is more like a studio time or a very quiet kind of introspective time. Sometimes I will bring my embroidery to like a friend's house and we'll just be talking and embroidering together, like especially during pandemic is when I pick up this work. It was storage in for a few years that I was moving around, but it happens kind of, it responds to different sides or needs of, let's say, different aspects of my personality. And also it's moving medias through like what is true to me at the moment. Let's say at one point, kind of like too much labeling of like feminism around my performance work with my collective. Then it became a little more like I wanted it to be less specific. I wanted it to be more inclusive and more minimal in terms of like identity. And so the work became a little more dark and more like improvise and experimental in terms of, let's say, that's when I quit doing video. Kind of like I was showing these videos in exhibitions and in my personal practice, and then people will come up to me and say, oh, I love the soundtrack of the video. Everyone would say that. So then I was investing more time in like creating the sound rather than the visual, and the visual became a more distractive, and so I kind of become more and more intuitive about like what is it necessary for the work to be delivering the message. So that's when I was just drawn to see what happened if I just do not put any kind of like explicit message, and the work becomes more abstract. And that's when the sound artwork starts. And so some kind of like fluidity and also integrity, it's very important to me.
I would like to talk with you about something that I'm always curious about, the differences between working alone and individual practice, and also your experience with the collective. Of course, I can understand that it's a group creation, and also, of course, the collective was really open to relational aesthetics, relational projects, even social engagement. But then after your experience with the collective, you have been still working with collaborations with other people. How is that sharing during the process time for you? How you make that possible, and if you feel comfortable with that?
Yeah. Well, I think mainly my art practice is kind of very intertwined with my life, and what I need at the moment. And I think I'm a intuitive, like very social person. At the same time, I can be very introspective. So, and the work is almost a pretext to experience. So the work is kind of motivated by resistance and resilience in terms of like the fast speed, velocity of technology. And so what happened if I just, create these experiences with friends? Is just like, okay, let's meet up and let's create. So a lot is kind of organic in terms of like people that inspired my life and inspired myself to be who I am. And so it's a reciprocity, and also it's necessary to have those other sides of my work where it's more like quiet and in the studio space.
I would like to talk now about the future. What is in the next months for you or your current project? What is something that we are working in GloGower? If you can show us a little bit, a sneak peek or of something that you are doing right now.
Yeah, I can share the screen and show you some of the current images. It's mainly unreleased work. First, I wanted to briefly show you what was the last exhibition at GloGower. So I paired this series of photographs, and I was mainly inspired by this idea of sort of like inhale and exhale in terms of correlation to what was happening in the pandemic. And so I paired different images. Sometimes it will be one of those collaborations, and then nature. And then I did this soundtrack that was embedded. And so while you were to see the show, you would start listening to this track. And so you can hear some of the track. And yeah, so it's a 10-minute track, and it sort of grows into a kind of intensity. The kind of the sound project is a bit intense, so you can go into the SoundCloud and listen to it while you have some time and can kind of dive into it. Yeah, so here, this was the images that we chose for the catalog the last year. So I will pair those images, some portraiture and some kind of detail of nature. And then, so here is, so we're working on putting some sort of artist book together and gathering different types of aspects of my work together and see how I can present this. So here you can see different types of footage of that performance that I showed before. And so there is different formats like digital and color, 35 millimeter and black and white film. And then, so here is another collaboration I did with my friend and amazing artist, Antonia Cruz. So she was documenting these actions we were doing in the place that I'm living now. And so I'm kind of evaluating how to present the work and how to choose the images. And then here a collaboration I did with Laura Well. And then there is this thing about manipulating the documentation again. So I am kind of printing these images and then cutting them and putting them together. So there is this sort of auto recycling of work, and mainly all this kind of studio work. It's kind of a gesture of detachment and kind of transgressing the work and kind of giving it a new life. This was another collaboration I did in 2015 with my brother Martin. And so I am cutting the photographs and putting them together. And here there's some old monotypes that I did really early on. And so I'm putting them together with photographs that I was kind of discarded as not being good. And so I am kind of drawn to the textural aspect of like picking up old work and making it something new. And so there is sort of like different chapters for this possible book. And it's kind of all in process, but it's has to do a bit more with abstraction and feelings and some kind of temperature. And then there is this series of performance I did in landscape. The early performative work I did in 2008. And so I am picking up these prints and cutting them and putting them together with watercolors and mixing them with sewing. And yeah, there is some kind of need to see what happened with this kind of like poetic gesture, since the work is mainly inspired by like how do we relate to nature and how do we sort of like relate. And mainly also just kind of like coming back to the paper and the more sort of pictorial side of my work that is important to me. And then there is this series of photo collage. And so I'm putting together 35 millimeter film and kind of making these kind of arrangements. And so somehow, sometimes the images kind of like they're lacking something when they're by themselves. So I'm kind of making some sort of a storytelling, but you can't really find the full story. And so let's say this work is mainly done through various collaborations I did in the time I spent in Berlin in 2018. And so the whole experience of the project of Glow Hour is like kind of like making all this work to make sense in terms of presentation and curation. And so let's say these photographs were taken in 2015, and I started slowly kind of doing some more abstract analog photography, not really knowing where it was going. And then now it's kind of putting the pieces together. This is kind of like a montage, like let's say what I maybe envision as kind of like a show, like a big wall, and then the photos can be experienced and imply some kind of like movement. And yeah, the work has that kind of intimacy in some ways. That is some of it.
I would like to go for the most curious part for me about this journey that you are sharing with us right now is how has been watching yourself again from that distance that time gives you, you know, like you have been funding works from a lot of years ago. Is somehow is an encounter with your artwork, previous artwork, but also yourself, some kind. How has been that for you in terms of process? Also because you have been working a lot, changing the images, taking the figurines out. How has been that for you?
It's been very positive, and mainly I think it's kind of re-encountering the experience of the studio. Like, let's say my last years in New York, I was doing my studio just behind a loft that I built in my room. And just more of like having a little more fast-paced, hectic life. It wasn't that much time. And then just living on a suitcase for like 3 years. So this has been kind of taking stuff out of boxes and just spending the time in the studio and wondering like, what should I do? And it just kind of my work starts from a kind of like a visceral need. So this kind of transgression to the work has been important to me. It just kind of happened. And so kind of giving it a new life, or just taking out of the way that the stuff that to me it feels like it wasn't delivering what I wanted to say. So and the work is, I guess, more like something sort of invisible and intangible. So let's say that kind of detached act is something empowering and just it feels kind of liberating.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a step of continuing and reactivate that activations or actions or gestures that you did some time ago. And we talk about this in our meetings about giving that documentation another life, some autonomy, some kind of another level or another structure to be autonomous, but also this gesture that you are doing right now, gathering all those materials with the idea of a book. Somehow you are building a storytelling narration, not just in those montage that you were showing us, but also when you are creating some sense of continuation between works, also layering. What is the narration in your work? Because I can totally see in some of the documentation of the performances when you display different frames. How is that relationship also, you coming from video, with narration, with storytelling?
Well, I think a lot of that process of putting the work together is through intuition and kind of looking to find that creative zone of some kind of flow that I not necessarily control with my mind, and it's not in my intention to fully tell kind of a concrete or a linear story. It's more like I put pieces together, and I like to leave the work a bit open, like a window to whatever it's going on emotionally or spiritually, or in terms of like what is our visions about gender and identity, and so I and also about beauty and nature, and so let's say I am interested in leaving that to the audience.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if someone wants to jump in to ask any question. I have to say that for me, it's a total pleasure to have this relationship with your work and really close and know from the beginning this book project that you are developing. I think it's really interesting, this journey that you are recovering from years ago. I'm really eager to see how the process goes, and I know that you have amazing pieces that not all of them are here, but the project that you will develop will be amazing, really interesting in terms of aesthetic, but also, as you said, really close to you, really intimate. So that is really interesting to me. And also I appreciate how you can get close to an artist through her artwork. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that takes a lot of courage somehow. I don't know if it's something that you think about like that, or how do you take?
Yeah, I think this is my way to, there's no other way for me. The work needs to be done for just to be a human, and it's something I need to do in order to be in my mental health and and yeah, so I think there is something larger, and but also what you say, it's important because yeah, I think I have to remind myself and let my work to be out there, and sometimes there is things along the way, like you know,
Yeah.
and so I it's kind of a conversation, and so I think it's important for creative, like any kind of creativity, to let it be, and so
yeah, thank you. I can totally relate with that answer, that that's the work that you need to do. So it's the way that you need to be honest with your practice. So thank you for work like that. Thank you for sharing, and come back to Clock Hour. It's great to have you. And thank you all for coming here to share the conversation with us. And I don't know, we'll be open, and also Elisa has her contact in Clock Hour's website if someone wants to, I don't know, write to you or something.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. It's been really nice. Also very helpful to have your guidance through the program. And yeah, you can be in touch, Outsit and Instagram, and also my website, elisaghs.com, and also through Glow Hour.
Super. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.